Today is the first Sunday of Lent. Today we start this way that will drive us until the Passion of Christ. And the Church and the liturgy present us today Jesus in the desert. The time of Lent, it's a time to meditate, to reflect in the reality of the sorrow, of the difficulties in our life. Sometimes we, also as Christians, but also as persons, we try to live the good life. We try to avoid all the difficulties. And there is also a good thing on that, but sometimes we try to cheat, because we try by all means to not suffer, to not accept the sorrow in our lives. But in the Gospel of today, Jesus is driven by the Spirit. Is the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, the Father who wants that Jesus goes to the desert, that Jesus goes and see by himself the suffering, the lowliness, and how many times in our lives we don't understand the suffering, and we believe that the suffering it's coming from the devil. But we don't see that sometimes it's God who wants us to face the suffering, to try to understand it. And in the Gospel of today, Jesus goes to the desert. And how many times, for example, in this morning, I was meditating in the desert, in the place of lowliness, because in the desert there is nothing. So how many times the desert as the place of lowliness, how many times in our lives, our vows as religious are places of lowliness? Because we are poor. We don't have anything. We avoid to have something, to be alone. We, as religious, try to avoid all the things that can be present in our life, to be alone. The vow of chastity, it's also to be alone of someone who is close. And also the obedience, to be alone and to my will be not with him, not with it. But why? Why this lowliness? Because the man was not created for lowliness. And the desert is also the answer, because the desert is the place where God in the Bible finds the man, and man finds God. We can see it in Israel when they were in the desert, and also in the prophets. They say that I will conduct it, I will drive it to the desert, and I will speak to her heart, speaking about the people of Israel. So the desert it's also the place of encounter. The place of encounter with God. And for us, as religious, the desert has not to be a place to try to avoid, but to try to go, to find the love, our possession, and our will. How powerful is the image of the desert? How powerful. And we can see it in the first reading. In the first reading, I don't know if you were attentive or listening, but in the first reading, we heard about the covenant between God and Noah. And the word covenant, it's very powerful. How many times we try to understand that the covenant is just for us. So we have to fulfill, we have to obey all the things that God is asking us. And that's truth. But a covenant is between two parts. It's between the man and God. And the man is obliged to obey the covenant, to fulfill the covenant, but also God is obliged to fulfill the covenant, to be faithful to the covenant. So God, when he made a covenant with us, in a certain way, he is obliged to be with us. How many times we doubt if God is worthy, if God is someone who can fulfill my life. And he is. He is God. And he will be always faithful because he made a covenant with us. And how many times we have to go to the desert to be attentive and to see that reality. So in our lives, the desert has to be present. And the present and the desert, the lowliness, the suffering, sometimes it's necessary because those are the moments in which we can find God. And he has made a covenant with us. He will be always with us. Let's continue this Holy Mass asking God to help us to be faithful to this covenant, to find the sense of the desert. What is the really meaning of the desert? And to accept it. And when the suffering, when the loneliness is coming to our lives, we have to accept it. Because sometimes it's the Spirit who is driving us to that, who is giving us that gift. So let's ask to God to accept it and to find the meaning of the loneliness and the suffering.